Welcome to the SoLoMo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give you the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is Tuesday, March 26th, 2013, and this is episode number 62.
In this episode, we're going to discuss YouTube's 1 billion users, Klout expanding their business offering, Flatter turning your social likes into financial support, Facebook's new timeline, and much more. Good evening, Mr. O'Brien. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How's it going, Adam?
It's going all right. I'm doing the show remote here. I'm not doing it as remote as I did a few months ago out in the Middle East and the other side of the world, but I'm doing it in Sacramento, kind of the home, what do you want to say, Sacramento, the place that's as close to the Bay Area as you can be without being in the Bay Area sort of thing. I used to live out here a little bit, and people kind of almost thought that they were Bay Area folks, but not quite. I don't think there's Bay Area folks out here.
I don't think so. If you guys get to count, then we're starting to count like Gilroy and some of those places.
I do know, I mean, did you live and grow up in the area over in, was it Manteca or something?
No, I grew up in Benicia, which is, it's technically the East Bay, though it's like the northernmost part of the East Bay. So, in the Bay Area at large, but, I was like 45 minutes outside of San Francisco.
So well, I mean, San Jose is too, right? So I guess technically it's within the radius, huh?
Yeah, I guess so. But Sacramento, that's a full like 2-hour drive. That's a trek.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. So what do we got going on today?
So we're going to kick things off with a quick little stat, because I always like to keep track of these things, especially when they come straight from the horse's mouth. And the stat that we've got for this week is YouTube announcing that they now officially recognize 1 billion monthly users. That is billion with a B. Holy crap, that's a big number. So billion, Facebook obviously the first social network to get there, but YouTube not far behind. And they're actually recognizing more than 1 billion users. This is 1 billion monthly users, so monthly uniques, which is surprisingly the number that no one can quite dig out of Google for Google+. But for YouTube, they're happy to say just how many monthly uniques that they get. Which, according to them, means that nearly 1 out of every 2 people on the internet visits YouTube. That's the internet at large, globally. If you've got an internet connection, you're 50% likely to view a YouTube video at some point during the month, which is pretty intense.
What's the percentage of those people that are there to watch cat videos? That's what I want to know.
Oh man, it's got to be up there, right? And they were talking about Psy and Madonna. They said they'd have to do a repeat performance in the Madison Square Garden in front of a packed house 200,000 times to equate the number of views that they've had on their online videos. So do a YouTube video or do 200,000 packed shows at Madison Square Garden. The choice is up to you. But that's an interesting stat. I don't think it's surprising. We've seen YouTube continue to grow and grow and grow. And at this point, if you're hosting video online, unless you're your own network and trying to build that up, you're probably putting your videos on YouTube. But, at the same time, they did note that every single one of the Adage Top 100 brands are running campaigns on YouTube. So big brands definitely paying attention. And so I think brands of all size should continue to pay attention to YouTube if you're not already. My guess is that most are at least aware of YouTube, and if not already running campaigns. But this seems to just show that, hey, YouTube is continuing to grow. I don't really see any competitors taking on YouTube in the near future. At one point, Vimeo was kind of an interesting alternative, and it's still a strong network, but it's very different. It's more art-focused. So I think in terms of marketing videos, YouTube, the place to go if you want to reach a large audience.
It's definitely a place where I always assess clients in their video needs, and if it's something that it requires video and requires being discovered or easy to share, or again, I think we've talked about. I hate that they're using the term, but if they wanted to potentially go viral, then YouTube is the place for it to go. If they are trying to host something that is really just for their company and they want to keep private, or they just want to have a a really nice video platform that's a bit cleaner looking and even slightly customizable than somebody like a Vimeo or even some other video sources out there, are great places to go.
Yeah, and we've talked about, the YouTube One channel. They're doing a little bit of a redesign coming up. There's definitely a lot of action going on over in YouTube to kind of transition from the place that just hosts random online videos to be more of an ongoing content distribution play. So I think it's smart moves on their behalf, and great opportunities for brands. I think a lot of what they're doing is saying, okay, brands and TV shows, movies, studios, what are the things that you need? Let's provide those to make sure that YouTube continues to grow. So definitely worth keeping focused on. And hey, if you're not already, look at ways of engaging the YouTube audience. So let's dive into our main topic for today, which is a network that we haven't heard from in a while, and that is Klout, Klout. Klout at one point was known for their social analytics scoring. So you could log in and you get your Klout score. It was essentially 1 to 100 of how influential you were. And it was a logarithmic scale or exponential scale, something like that, where 100 is almost impossible, but so is 1. A lot of people fall in that mid-range, and then, going from 50 to 60 was actually a pretty sizable jump. But what they introduced recently was Klout for Business, and this is potentially a rather disruptive service. So Klout for Business is a set of analytics that are going to essentially let brands know where their influencers are engaging with that brand and how and who and what, sort of everything to do with influence and how a brand can understand and capture that. And I thought this was a really interesting service, but interested to get your take on it, Adam. What was your, first reaction to this? Do you think, hey, Klout's back, maybe they got something interesting here? Or at this point, is Klout sort of on the downhill and this is a last grasp for something relevant?
My first reaction was it's about time, in the sense that Klout's had the score for a while. It's had the perk thing going on. And shortly after, there were a lot of these other people, and even maybe potentially in parallel early on, there were a lot of other folks like Peer Index and others who were creating sort of this score. There's been a number of people who have had applications and services that you would have to sign up for. They were really focused towards PR, business marketing companies and executives who wanted to be able to identify influencers and do their own sort of outreach in that sense as well. Whereas Klout obviously is for the most part, people think of it as the more consumer-facing scoring mechanism that they have in their whole perk system that they have. But they haven't really done much more, at least on the front end. A lot of these companies always do it on the back end, where they're wheeling and dealing and trying to find ways of adding value in kind of more customized fashions with individual businesses. Foursquare, when it came out and it had their branded pages, you had to go and apply in order to actually try to get some attention from them and have them help you put you into their system. And there's been a lot of other folks that have done the same thing. And then eventually they call it their self-serve model, where you can sign up and then you could access it after paying for whatever model it is per month or one time or whatever. So Klout, I think it's still the predominant player in this space. And the person who really wins at this is the one that really has a good subset of data. It has people who are willing to participate, willing to opt in, willing to connect one or more of their social accounts, preferably as many accounts as possible, and use all those data points to their advantage. And so Klout has done that. They've been doing that for years, and they even say it in their blog posts related to this particular offering, is that they've been collecting this data for 5 years. And now they're going to, and I hope that what they do is they do something a little bit more than just make the information that has helped them identify good people to provide perks to. I hope, and what I've seen at least, and I think you'll go into it a little bit, Corey, is from what I've seen, they're providing a little bit different of a subset of data to users and to businesses so that it can identify influencers that they can not only give perks to, but potentially do other things with. Have specials or sales or reach out to folks and have them test new products or crowdsourcing or whatever the case may be. So for me, it really is a thing of it's about time. And I kind of think that rather than thinking of it as kind of their last grasp or anything, I don't necessarily think Klout's on the downhill. I think Klout is still popular. Klout is still used by many people. And the bottom line is unless you completely opt out, your data is still being fed in there, so you still can be qualified as an influencer, as a potential person that somebody wants to reach out to. So I think everything is really in favor of Klout in this instance, as long as what they provide adds value in the end, because they haven't really effectively rolled it out to a lot of people just yet. What do you think, Corey?
Part of why I think this is potentially really disruptive is, first off, one of the things they say that they're going to help brands understand is whether you are engaging your influencers on the networks where they are most actively engaging. And so this is a service that a lot of paid tools, and really expensive paid tools, are doing now, which is saying we will help you kind of track your audience, figure out where that audience is participating, figure out where you should be spending your time. And there's a lot of brands that are paying, thousands of dollars a month to say, help me identify where are these pockets of fans, where's this conversation happening. Some brands have essentially just given up and said, we're just going to go to Facebook and kind of screw it, we'll ignore everybody else. But I think for the brands that are saying, okay, outside of Facebook, where else should I be paying attention to? This is a really valuable service. And so it's interesting to see Klout essentially giving it away for free, which makes me wonder, okay, well, if they're giving that away for free, what's their end goal? And, maybe it's to push people into this perks concept and kind of revitalize perks. I think perks, I haven't really seen a lot of big brands doing interesting things there lately. So maybe the idea is, we'll show some value, we'll give some of the value back, but it gives us a sales opportunity to push brands into perks.
I do think that that's very much the way they're going to go, because as soon as you sign up initially for the business thing to get notified when it comes out, one of the first things that they do is send you an automated email back, and they say, oh, by the way, if you're interested in a perk, blah, blah, blah. And I've had somebody not only via the automated email, but I've had a salesperson actually reach out to me twice via email after that as well, saying, well, if you're interested in a perk while you wait, go ahead and do that. And a lot of their marketing material around this seems to point in that direction. So I think you may be onto something there.
Yeah, and it's definitely a sales tool for them. Right now, it is free, but the only way to get access to it is to provide your contact information, which is just like a lot of companies use with landing pages where it's, get our white paper, and you just put your name and email address, and you're basically signing up for their newsletter system. So yes, you are right now feeding yourself into their sales flow. At some point that might change. You might just be able to sign up and say, hey, give me my data, and then down the road, they'll look at your account information and probably contact you and try to upsell you. But it's free, which it's an exchange of value. They're giving you kind of quote unquote free data in exchange for being able to pitch you on some of their paid services. But the other thing that they're claiming to be able to do is to tell you which topics your audience influences others on to help you maximize your content efforts and drive consideration. So this is super interesting for this shift that we're seeing a lot of brands make into content marketing, because it's essentially saying, okay, what you as a brand want to do is provide interesting content to your most influential users that they can then repurpose and distribute out to their own audience. And so rather than trying to guess and say, well, what types of information do my influential users want that they can then turn around and use, Klout is saying, hey, we can identify that. We can give you a list of here's the 10 things you should be talking about in order to provide your most influential users the most value that they can then turn around and kind of broadcast your message for you. I think this could be potentially really powerful. And Klout you can get this PlusK system where when you view a Klout user's profile, you can actually give them a point in certain categories. So my guess is they're going to use that and say, okay, 50% of your audience has received a PlusK in automotive. You should be talking a lot about cars and talking about, the automotive segment. That'll really resonate well, and your audience can then turn around and kind of speak on your behalf. Or maybe it's DIY or home improvement or all these categories that Klout has been gathering data on for the past couple of years. They can now use that data and open it up to brands to say, hey, create content about this stuff. So really interesting opportunity there. And I hope that that's more than just, here's a bullet list of the 5 things you should be talking about and good luck. I hope it's more nuanced than that and tries to kind of explain some of the more niche topics and not just, broad strokes of like, oh, you should be talking about crafting or whatever. It's like, well, that's not that helpful. So
It's a little bit akin to, for instance, not YouTube, excuse me, Twitter specifically, but Facebook has it as well. But Twitter's sponsored posts, sponsored tweets, allowing you to be very reactive in real time because it's only 140 characters to the content that happens to be, to the conversation that happens to be happening at that time. So it's like real-time marketing in a way. It's real-time reaction to what's going on. This is on the slower end of that scale. This is a little bit more long-term. I don't think this is going to be providing feedback about what people are interested in at this given moment, at this exact time. And so I think it's going to help brands and businesses be a little bit more fluid in what they provide, in accordance with the needs and the discussions that are happening and the topics that their audience is influenced, or excuse me, is interested in. And it's an interesting paradigm, instead of creating content that you kind of think about, that you think people are interested in, and distributing it, to actually be aware of it, whether it be in real time or not, generate it and then put it out there, for folks. And the ones that will do it well will not be the ones that fabricate content with absolute disregard for who they are as a brand. So for instance, if I'm Oreo, and we talk about Oreo because it did such an awesome job recently with the real-time marketing stuff. If I'm Oreo and the topic is about cars, that, we find out that 50% of our audience are into cars, it may not be appropriate unless you can find a real great way to keep the topic on brand or the content on brand that you're distributing. So it still doesn't mean that you should blindly just grab the topics and start writing about those things, or whatever the case may be. But there's some really interesting creative ways that you can take a look at what those overlaps of interests are for your particular audience.
yeah, one of the things that I'd love to see from this, and I'm not sure if it's going to be included, but I think if they actually gave specific audience members and let you know who your most influential users are, that could really be powerful. So, it's one thing to know, okay, my entire Facebook audience or my entire social audience, here's the things that they're interested in. But it's another to say, here's your 10 most influential users that have talked about your brand in the last 3 months, and here's the things that they're interested in specifically. And suddenly you can start to really narrow your focus. And maybe you've got PR opportunities and you want to engage them on a one-to-one basis and say, hey, you have a lot of online influence. I want to share this thing, that thing, this new message. What do you think? What can I give you to help kind of spread that message? Because that's data that Klout has. And maybe, again, this is the line between complimentary and paid. Maybe they kind of tease you and say, hey, here's your audience in broad terms, but if you really want to know, we've got this list of 20 influencers and the things that they're interested in specifically. But that's the kind of data where I can really see some smart marketers taking advantage of that and doing some really interesting things that step outside of just, I'm going to give away 200 kind of free samples, and really narrowing it down and saying, I'm gonna narrow in on my most influential users and do something that goes above and beyond in order to really get those people engaged, because that's your that ideal combination of passion and influence. That's the people that you want to reach.
So my question to you, Corey, is, because I don't think you've answered this so far, and you asked me at the beginning of the segment, do you feel that Klout is still relevant?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I think that the perks, I've definitely felt like they had their time to shine and it kind of fell off. I'm not seeing good brands. I'm not seeing interesting perks. It's kind of, at first it was like, oh, it's these exclusive events and it was really interesting, unique things. And lately it's, it's 40% off coupon. And you're like, well, I just saw that on, one of these group buy deals. It's not even a unique purchase. You're trying to like hide a coupon inside of Klout and pretend like it's something new and different. So if this represents a revitalization of perks back into being really interesting, I think Klout could be more relevant. I think that there's a lot of data inside of their score. People got hung up on the whole, what does my exact number mean? And, why am I a 55 when this person's a 57, blah, blah, blah. And I think we got too focused on the number and less focused on the actual value of, broadly, Klout can do a pretty good job of saying these are the things that you're interesting about. These are the things that your audience engages when you talk about. So, this is their chance to kind of bring that data back to the surface and say, hey, don't forget, we can do all these cool things and we're not just a number. We're also very specific topics and categories, and being able to find specific networks outside of just the big Facebook and the big Twitter that everyone always thinks about, that could certainly make them more relevant than I think they have been. So I would say that this is definitely a chance for them to regain relevance, though I would put them on the downhill slope. I would say that this is, maybe a last chance for them, and if they don't pull this off, and if they don't get a lot of solid businesses using them again, that it's going to be a struggle to keep going much longer.
All right. Well, let me ask you this other quick question then before we close out the segment. Do you use Klout actively, or do you check your, Klout score?
I check my Klout, or I'm aware of my Klout score only because I installed the Klout application on my iPhone, which pings me when there's a score change. But at the same time, when it changes, I don't really care that much. It's been going down a little bit lately, and I'm like, whatever. Because at one point I was like, I got to keep that thing up. I really want to get some of these interesting perks that I was seeing. And when the perks stopped being that interesting, I stopped really caring. Like, if it goes up, if it goes down, I don't really see the net effect of that. So I do casually keep aware of it. I think, I use, I think it's called Reportive, which is the Gmail add-on that tells you about people that you're connecting through Gmail with, and it kind of gives you a bunch of information, one of which is their Klout score, and sometimes I'll look at that and just kind of, make note of it. Oh, that's interesting, but I don't actively use it that often. What about yourself?
I will say I probably don't go to the site that often as much as I do look at the iPhone app, and I do actually monitor it most days, to be honest. And the reason that I do so is because I'm really interested in seeing day to day what is affecting the score. So when I know that I'm doing something on certain networks and I'm more active, or certain people end up retweeting me, or on, I'm connected on Facebook and Google Plus. So I can see when I have a particularly active day or some piece of content catches on fire. I'm really interested to see how that overall affects what's going on Klout, and I can do so to some extent, see how that happens. And even going to Klout.com, they've tried to be a little bit more transparent now and showing you what pieces of content seem to be affecting things. And so I'm definitely doing it with those reasons in mind.
All right, so it sounds like something interesting to pay attention to. Probably worth checking out. Whether or not you're willing to get into their sales cycle in exchange for some of this data is up to you. I would say, give it a shot and see. The worst thing that you have to do is respond to an email that they say, hey, do you want to check out our paid service? And say, no, not really. I'm not interested in that at the time. I'm just kind of checking out this new service. But I would say it's worth checking out and seeing what kind of data they can provide you, considering, like I said, it is a free service. So I think a lot of value coming from not a lot of exchange needed in terms of what you've got to give back.
And it's to find out more information, and we'll link to it in the show notes, but I believe it's Klout.com/business. Well, Klout.com/S/business. I don't know why they have that S in there. And you'll see their sort of marketing page that talks about it and be able to sign up.
All right. Well, with that, let's jump into my favorite segment of the show. The lightning round. Bum, bum, bum. So I've got 2 stories in the lightning round for today. With 60 seconds on the clock, let's dive right into the first one. Ready and go. First thing we're going to talk about is a service called Flattr, Flattr. And Flattr was an interesting service. It's got a bit of a checkered past. It was a service where you could sign up, and for, I believe, a minimum of $5 a month, they would post little Flattr buttons around the web, and blogs could put it on their own site, and then you'd click that, and it would distribute your $5 to the people who you had clicked to flatter. There was mixed reviews around that, so now what they've done is they've actually integrated with a lot of services, and they kind of piggyback on liking, favoriting, and starring things. So you like, favorite, and star something, now they're going to pay people directly. It's not just bloggers. You could, like a bunch of photos on 500 pics, or like a bunch of sounds on SoundCloud, and actually pay those people for those likes and for those stars. So I think it's an interesting service. It's going to be tough to overcome their past and some of their history, but it's worth keeping an eye on, because I think there's something here to the micro donation for content creation. All right, Adam, 60 seconds on the clock. What's your take on Flatter's new service? Ready and go.
So I'm going to use some of my time asking you a quick question, Corey. How do they connect to a financial source? Are they connecting to your financial source like a PayPal or something, or how are they doing that?
Yeah, so you as a distributor of money, you connect to, I think, either PayPal or credit card and kind of pre-fund your account. And then if you're a content creator, you actually have to sign up to receive the money, but then I think they can either, cut you a check or direct deposit, that sort of thing, typical of like an Amazon Associates.
So I think that the fact that they are piggybacking on others providers is great. I think that the list of providers they have with Vimeo, Instagram, Flickr, Twitter, GitHub, SoundCloud, 500 Pix, and others is really awesome. I think there's just too many hoops to jump through in order for the average person to really get behind it and say, look, not only is it, me giving somebody else money, but I have to do all this work initially to get it set up.
Yeah, I agree with that. I really want this to work, which is too bad because I don't think it will, but it's, the concept is there. It's like, put a little bit of money in. When you like something, star that. It exchanges out a little bit of value. We're not talking big dollars here, but for a service like this to work, everyone basically has to sign up. You got to get, this huge number of users to both sign up to give money and sign up to receive money. And it's just such a tough barrier. So keep an eye on it, but I don't know if it's gonna work long term. We'll see. All right, 60 seconds back on the clock. Let's dive into our second topic of the day. Ready and go. So Facebook, in addition to the updated news feed, rolled out a new timeline recently. And despite the fact that I do not still have the new news feed, I do have the new timeline.
The news. No, I didn't get the news feed. I got the other one. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so new timeline. This is your personal profile, and it's basically all the information about you. It's really interesting. They're doing a lot of shifting of information, and it seems a lot of it has to do with categorizing graph search. What's really cool is they're kind of prompting users to update a lot of their graph search information. So I think that's going to do a lot of good for brands who want to appear in things like the likes pages. One of the most interesting things, though, is this could potentially be a sneak peek at some of the page layouts for brand pages, and they're really de-emphasizing applications. So I don't have any insider information. I wish I did, but I would say that, if you've put a lot of focus on your brand applications, it might be time to consider alternatives for those. All right, Adam, 60 seconds on the clock. What's your take on these changes? Ready and go.
At first blush, because I got this in the last 24 hours and I was able to take a peek at it and everything. I think there's some elements of it that make it much cleaner looking. It's easier to learn about a particular individual because of the way that they have their about box, all those sorts of things. They take away what doesn't need to be visual, for instance, like your friends box and your photos, and they turn them into, rather than these squares that have the latest photo, they turn them into these just text links. So I think that that's all nice. They're diminishing the stuff that isn't as important as the big images and content and applications that go into your feed. Regarding how the apps show up in your feed on your timeline specifically, not your news feed, but your timeline, your personal timeline. I didn't really see that those seem to be dramatically changed just yet. So at any rate, it's a nice little subtle change, and maybe for brands in the future.
Not necessarily the applications like, your photos and your Nike running or whatever, that'll stay the same. What I was talking about is that little drop down where it used to show like the 4 thumbnails and then you'd hit the drop down and there was other stuff. Like that's gone now. That's just a text menu. And so they're sort of shifting applications into this smaller column, which works great for this. But if you're a brand that's got these 800 pixel wide canvas pages, I don't know where those are going to go. So if this is what all pages are going to look like in the future, they may be putting some big changes on the horizon. We'll have to see, but definitely an interesting kind of preview.
I mean, I think what would make sense is if they were to have like 2-tier navigation or something, but they make more room for it by taking away these big squares that they had previously, although it doesn't make them visually as appealing as it is currently for brand pages, if that's what they do to those.
So the last thing we're going to cover today is an action item, and this one's a quickie but a goodie. So we've One of the recurring themes for quite a few shows now has been content creation. And if you're the brand, or if you're the type of brand that's put a lot of focus into well-crafted, longer written pieces, Amazon just released a send to Kindle button. And I think this is really cool. So you could always send articles to your Kindle, but it was kind of a clunky process. You'd have to email your Kindle a link and, it was sort of a weird thing. But Amazon has followed in the footsteps of things like the dig button and actually created a send to Kindle button. So if you're a content producer, you can add this to, let's say, a blog, and with one click, somebody can automatically send your blog post to their Kindle, which especially if you're doing longer blog posts that people aren't likely to see and think, I'll just chug through that in a couple minutes. If you're writing things that might take 5 minutes or more, this could be a great way of ensuring that people actually do take the time to read that, because they'll think, it looks interesting. I don't have the time now, but I'll send it to my Kindle and I'll read it on the train ride home or on my commute or, next time I'm standing in line, that sort of thing. So I really like this. We'll include a link to the blog post where they announced this in the show notes. These are going to be available at SoLoMoShow.com. But I think this is, a really great tool for people that are producing content. If you don't have a lot of written content, you can probably ignore this one, because if you're doing short blog posts or a lot of imagery, it's not really applicable. But anybody doing longer blog posts should definitely consider including the Send to Kindle button in their website or theme.
My quick comment about that is I think it's too little too late. But I think there's so many other services out there that are completely, platform agnostic, so to speak, that I think it's not something that's going to be adopted by a lot of folks. I may be wrong, though. It may be for those folks that are really diehard Kindle users and readers, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm guessing you're, talking about things like Instapaper and Pocket, which for people that have already kind of migrated over to a tablet, that's definitely a go-to. But I think, even on my daily commute, I see plenty of people rocking the old school Kindle. So yes, it's not going to be, earth shattering. You're not going to have millions of people clicking this send a Kindle button but for the people that do have a Kindle button and do use it as a read later type service, I think they could definitely use this. It'll be something that's pretty easy. It's not, if you've already got a bunch of buttons on your site, it's just adding one more button. So I wouldn't redesign an entire site around this button specifically, but if you got room for it, I would say definitely throw it up there and see if you can get some clicks on it. And if not, pull it back down. Don't use it. But worth testing out to see if your audience is the Kindle audience.
Yep.
All right, well, we covered a lot this week, and there's always plenty more to think about as these stories unfold. But the one thing that we always say is we're happy to connect with our audience on a variety of channels. So the easiest would be to reach us via Twitter. We are available at SoLoMo Show, or you can reach myself directly. I'm at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi. You can also reach us via email. We are on Gmail, so that email address is SoLoMoShow, SoLoMoShow @gmail.com. We also have a Facebook page and encourage you to go on over there and like it. We have a page on Google Plus if that's your preference. And we have an account where we have a number of boards on Pinterest, a Pinterest account. And so you can find pretty much all of our shows over there are being shared. And you can check those out and repin those to your heart's delight.
There you go. And we mentioned it before, but just to reiterate, if you would like to check out some of the links that we discussed today, as well as some additional links that we always like to throw in there, the show notes can be found at SoLoMoShow.com, or they're also available in your podcast player of choice. The podcast that we put out is an annotated podcast and includes some nice chapter markings and images, and it also should include show notes. So if you're using a podcast player that doesn't show show notes, it's time to get a new podcast player application. And the other thing that we haven't talked about in a while, but we would love if you're out there and thinking, how can I support these guys? The thing that would help us reach a new audience is a review in iTunes. So if you actually go to SoLoMoShow.com/review, we put a nice little how-to if you're wondering how to actually go through that process. It's not necessarily difficult, but sometimes the steps themselves are a little tricky, so we put a little guide you can follow through and learn how to rate the show in iTunes, and we would really appreciate that. That helps us to discover a new audience, get discovered by new people, so, take a couple minutes if you like the show and give it a rating in iTunes. And with that, we will call this episode a wrap, and we hope that you join us next week for another great episode of the SoLoMo Show.
Take care.